Hello and welcome to another Magic: The Gathering draft video. I'm Al here with How to Draft MTG. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at my overall draft strategy for Innistrad Crimson Vow, a general pick order, and how to read signals. As always, if you like what we're doing here on this channel, please click like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, leave a comment in the comments below. Let's get to it. So let's start with a little bit of a format overview and my thoughts on Innistrad Crimson Vow so far. So I feel in any game of Limited here, we should be assuming that our opponents will either A, have a close to unbeatable rare in their deck, or B, be playing a very aggressive strategy to try and beat other decks with great rares. Therefore, the following needs to be true about our deck. Number one, we can win quickly before our opponents can draw and cast their rares, even if we have rares of our own. Number two, we can outpace aggressive decks with either repeatable life gain and or card advantage, which usually comes in the form of blood tokens, which allow you to essentially cycle away a card in your hand for 1 mana, which is super useful once you've gotten to 5 or 6 mana and you don't need to draw any more lands. Your opponent will start drawing lands, you'll start cycling away yours and drawing more spells and get to beat them that way. Number three, we have cheap removal that can slow down our opponent's aggressive starts, such as Flame Blessed Bolt and Abrade. And number four, we have removal that can deal with any threat, notably Bleed Dry. The colors that do these things best are red, black, and white. Therefore, these are our ideal starting points if we do not open an excellent rare in green or blue. I will refer to red, black, and white as our pivot colors. Now let's discuss the core commons in these colors and how they pair with each other color. Start with red. We've got Flame Blessed Bolt and Abrade, the two most efficient removal spells in the format. The Exile clause on Bolt is extremely valuable in this format. You got a lot of people trying to recur their creatures, a lot of creatures that die and have an effect on death. Bolt counteracts all that kind of stuff. Voldaren Epicure, Blood Petal Celebrant, Belligerent Guest, and Falcon Wrath Celebrants are all efficient, aggressive creatures that generate blood tokens. And finally, we've got Reckless Impulse, which effectively is draw 2 cards for 2 mana in a deck with lots of low mana value cards. So the red decks here, we got red black, which is a natural fit and one of the strongest archetypes. Black adds more removal, aggressive creatures, and card advantage in the form of blood tokens. And you've got Gluttonous Guest and Diregraph Scavenger to help us gain life and stabilize against other aggressive decks. If you find yourself struggling in this format, I would recommend trying harder to get into red-black, maybe even try to force it a couple drafts. Not the optimal strategy, but I think it might give you a better idea of what's been working a little bit better, at least for me in this format. Next we have red-green. Green provides Weaver Blossoms, Hookhand Mariner, and Flourishing Hunter as efficient creatures. They're a little bit larger and have wolf and werewolf synergies, which means that something like Hungry Ridge Wolf in red becomes a little bit more desirable here. You got Wolf Strike that can deal with larger threats. I found this to be the most consistent green archetype, so we will be leaning towards red if we start in green. Next we got red-white. White provides cheap, aggressive creatures and life gain. Traveling Minister is particularly effective as a way to push damage and repeatedly gain life, which makes it very difficult for other aggressive decks to race us. Finally, we've got red-blue. Blue adding Syncopate, which is an effective way to deal with your opponent's bombs, along with Lantern Bearer as a cheap, evasive threat. I've not found the spells payoffs to be particularly worth building around, nor have I found this archetype to be very strong, so I wouldn't really be looking to draft this without really good rares in blue. All right, let's look at black. Black brings us Bleed Dry, which is the format's premier removal spell. It can answer almost any creature and at instant speed, and very importantly, it exiles, which matters a ton in this format, as we've discussed. For creatures, we've got Ragged Recluse, Gluttonous Guest, Desperate Farmer, Blood Crazed Socialite, Diregraph Scavenger. These are efficient creatures that provide blood and or life gain at different points on the curve. And finally, we've got Pointed Discussion, which gives us some card advantage and some blood synergy. So the black decks, we got black-red, as discussed previously, one of the format's strongest decks. We've got black-white. White adds additional life gain, and that makes this deck very difficult for aggressive decks to beat. Courier Bat becomes a little bit more desirable in this deck. Can lack a little bit of pressure to close out games quickly before opponents can play their rares, so Bleed Dry is particularly important here, as you're going to need ways to answer those big rares from your opponent. Black-Blue is next. Exploit is not very well supported at common, as was sort of my inclination in the original video for this format. Therefore, I would not recommend drafting this archetype without powerful rares or really good uncommons such as Biolume Egg, Fell Stinger, Diver Scob, and Undead Butler. If you are in this deck, Doom Dissenter is a lot more desirable, as we really want good creatures to sacrifice to our exploit stuff. Otherwise, we're not getting a very good rate on some of the common exploit creatures, and even the uncommon ones in a way. Next is Black-Green. This deck I found to be a bit slow and lacks good options at 2 mana, which is a big problem in a format where generally you want to be attacking. I would not recommend drafting it without excellent rares or really good uncommons like Brambleworm, Infestation Expert, Catapult Fodder, and Ancient Lumberknot. Our final pivot color is white. We've got Traveling Minister, Drogskull Infantry, Kindly Ancestor, and Heron of Hope as the best creatures in this color. These are cheap, efficient creatures that can win quickly, and they're able to outlast aggressive opponents because of how much life we're able to gain with them. If you have not activated Traveling Minister with Heron of Hope on the battlefield, I implore you to try to do so. It's the best. And white also gives us Sigarda's Imprisonment and Fierce Retribution, which are solid removal spells, not quite on the level of the red and black ones, but still high picks and important parts of any white deck. And let's look at the white decks. We've got white-red, white-black, which we've already discussed. Very good decks. Recommend drafting them. And then we've got white-blue. Blue gives us Lantern Bearer as a cheap threat, and Syncopate and Siphon Essence to counter opposing bomb rares and protect our early board presence. And Nurturing Presence is also quite powerful in white-blue. So with white-blue, you're sort of like a low-curve Flyers aggro deck with some Disturb synergy to sort of outlast the aggressive decks, and life gain to outlast the aggressive decks. And your evasive, cheap creatures are pressuring your opponents who are playing a more of a controlling game. And if you can get ahead on board, then your counterspells actually become good. If you're behind, your counterspells are pretty bad. So you want to have a low curve, and you want to be attacking your opponents. Cruel Witness is an additional threat in the air if needed. Scattered Thoughts plays well with the counterspells if you have a bunch of those, and helps us get ahead on cards. Finally, Ceremonial Knife performs pretty well with all the cheap creatures and gives us access to Blood, which is another nice form of card advantage for us. And also, the +1 power on 1 power Flyers is pretty nice with this one. This is the most consistent blue archetype, so we will be leaning towards drafting white if we start in blue. And finally, the archetypes we haven't yet discussed, blue-green and white-green. Not found them to be well supported at common. I do not recommend drafting them without excellent rares and uncommons in both colors. Otherwise, we're probably better off just drafting one of those colors and one of the pivot colors, for example. All right, let's get into draft strategy and pick order. If we open a bomb rare, we will be heavily incentivized to draft that color or color pair. These are cards such as Catilda, Dawnheart Martyr, Faithbound Judge, Voice of the Blessed, Wedding Announcement, Welcoming Vampire, Cemetery Illuminator, Dream Shackle Geist, Hullbreaker Horror, Jacob Hawken Inspector, Mirror Hall Mimic, Bloodvial Purveyor, Cemetery Desecrator, Dreadfast Demon, Falconwrath Forebear, Henrika Domnathi, Sorin the Mirthless, Toxrill the Corrosive, Voldaren Bloodcaster, Ill-Tempered Loner, Maniform Hellkite, Olivia's Attendants, Stencia Uprising, Volatile Arsonist, Avabrook Caretaker, Glorious Sunrise, Ulvenwald Oddity, Anjay Maid of Dishonor, Edgar Charmed Groom, Helena and Elena Partners, and Olivia Crimson Bride. If we're not so lucky to open a sweet rare, we'll be looking to establish ourselves in one of the aforementioned pivot colors, being red, black, or white, by the end of pack 1. If we start with a blue or green card, we will be slightly more incentivized to draft white or red, respectively, so that we can end up in blue-white or green-red. Next, we'll be looking for premium removal, such as Parasitic Grasp, Bleed Dry, Hero's Downfall, Flame Blessed Bolt, Rending Flame, and Abrade. Just below the premium removal, we're looking to take the set's top uncommons. These are monocolored to give us flexibility in the draft. These are cards like Alluring Suitor, Vampire's Vengeance, Voltaic Visionary, Fell Stinger, Angelic Quartermaster, Circle of Confinement, Twinblade Geist, Lunar Rejection, Diver Scob, and Pack Song Pup. And there are some multicolor cards that are good enough to be exceptions to that monocolor rule, such as Blood Tithe Harvester, Brine Comber, and Biolume Egg, which is essentially a blue-black card. Past those, we'll be starting to take the core commons we discussed earlier, roughly in order of mana value, meaning we're taking the lower costed cards first. Taking low-cost cards gives you more options throughout the draft, as you want to have more low-cost cards than high-cost cards, so you can take that good 5-drop you open in pack 3 if you haven't yet taken 3 5-drops and you already have, 7 or 8 2-drops. You feel real good about taking that busted 5-drop rare that you might open and get past. So these are the commons we discussed earlier: Traveling Minister, Drogskull Infantry, Fierce Retribution, Kindly Ancestor, Sigarda's Imprisonment, Heron of Hope, Voldaren Epicure, Blood Petal Celebrant, Belligerent Guest, Falconwrath Celebrant, Reckless Impulse, Ragged Recluse, Gluttonous Guest, Desperate Farmer, Pointed Discussion, Blood Crazed Socialite, Diagraph Scavenger, Lantern Bearer, and Wolf Strike. Also, don't forget about Evolving Wilds, which is a real nice piece of fixing in any format, and certainly this one. Finally, any cards that have not yet been mentioned should just be taken as needed for our card pool. Some very general deck building guidelines. You want to have a low curve with lots of 2 mana value cards and few 5 or 6 mana value cards, especially in this format where a lot of the busted rares are 5, 6, 7 mana cards. You don't want to have a bunch of 5, 6, 7 mana commons in case you open or get past sweet rares in pack 3. You want to be able to take those and not be worried, oh, I don't have enough 2-drops, my deck's not going to do anything early. Play 15 or more creatures, pretty standard for limited. Play 1 or 2 combat tricks, especially if we're attacking, we want to bust through people's blockers. And play 17 lands, one of which being Evolving Wilds if possible. Okay, so let's go through the actual draft strategy once we're sitting down and looking at the packs. So picks 1 through 4, we're just going to be taking the best card in the pack. Picks 5 through 8, we're taking the best card in the pack, ideally in a pivot color being red, black, or white, as we've discussed before. We're going to start to form a picture of what colors are being passed to us. This is known as reading signals. For example, if we see Bleed Dry pick 5 and some more solid black cards picks 6 through 8, there's a good chance the players to our right are not drafting black. This is known as black being open. This means we can reasonably expect to see good black cards in pack 3 as well, as those same players will be passing to us again. In picks 9 through 14, these are the cards that no one else at the table wanted. In case you're somewhat new to drafting, the pack goes around the table. There's 8 people at the table, so by the time you're on pick 9, you're seeing again the pack that you started with, which means that's gone around the table and nobody has taken the cards that are remaining in it. So if we are seeing playable cards of one of the aforementioned pivot colors, again being red, black, or white, it's possible that no one else at the table is drafting that color, and we should strongly consider moving in. By the end of pack 1, ideally we have identified our main pivot color, red, black, or white. This is the color we have the most quality cards of, or is the most open, and hopefully both. We may have also identified an open secondary color as well. If so, great, we'll keep it in mind for pack 3. We are hoping to not be too heavily invested in blue or green at this point, outside of having some awesome bomb rares in those colors. If we are, we're going to try to take cards that play well in blue-white if we're in blue, or green-red if we're in green, as those decks will come together the most consistently in the draft. Heading into packs 2 and 3, we are likely pivoting between 2 or more color pairs. We will continue to prioritize the cards of our main color and let the good cards we get past and or the good synergies present in our card pool push us towards our secondary color. We can decide on our secondary color as late as pack 3 if we're deep enough into our first color. For example, let's say we have 5 good white cards, 2 good red cards, and 2 good blue cards by the end of pack 1. We've determined that white is open from our right. We are now pivoting between white-red and white-blue. We will continue to prioritize good white cards through packs 2 and 3. If we see a great red or blue card or a white-red or white-blue signpost uncommon, we will pick those and let them push us towards drafting white-red or white-blue. We will also keep an eye on the synergies present in our pool. If we have some good disturb cards, we will want to prioritize blue more, as red does not offer any good Disturb synergies in this set. And finally, ignore signals in Pack 2 for the most part. The packs are moving in the opposite direction, and therefore the signals will be completely different from Pack 1 and will not properly inform us of what to expect in Pack 3. So if we saw that white was open in Pack 1, and in Pack 2 we're not really seeing it as much, we're starting to see a lot of black, even though we didn't see black in Pack 1, don't panic. White will come back to us in Pack 3. That's going to do it for this one. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed the channel, please click like and subscribe and leave a comment in the comments below if you have any questions or comments. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.